The palace shook with the force of distant explosions. Taemin grabbed onto a table to steady himself as Hyeri and Jiwoo immediately moved into defensive positions around him. Through the windows he could see bright flashes of light in the sky as ships engaged in combat high above the planet. "Who's attacking?" Taemin demanded. "The Krauth Dominion," Jiwoo said grimly, checking her weapon. "They have been enemies of the Empire for decades. But there has been a peace treaty. This is a violation of everything." Hyeri was already accessing her communicator. "This is Princess Hyeri. What is the situation?" A voice crackled back, stressed and urgent. "Your Highness, the Krauth have launched a full invasion. They hit 3 border worlds simultaneously. Our fleets are responding, but they are coordinated in ways we have never seen. It is like fighting one mind controlling thousands of ships." "Hive mind," Taemin said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. "I read about the Krauth in the archives Hajun gave me. They are a hive mind species. Each ship is not thinking independently. They are all controlled by a central intelligence." "We know this," Jiwoo said. "Our fleet commanders have always struggled against their coordination." "Because you are trying to fight them like individuals," Taemin replied, his mind racing. "You need different tactics. Unpredictable tactics." The door opened and Emperor Doyon strode in, already wearing battle armor. "Taemin, I need you in the command center. Now." They rushed through the palace corridors, guards and soldiers running in all directions. The command center was a massive room filled with holographic displays showing the battle situation across multiple star systems. It looked bad. The Krauth were pushing deep into Valtorian territory, and the Empire's traditional battle formations were barely slowing them down. Admiral Kiwan was there, directing fleet movements with other military commanders. He looked up when Taemin entered and his expression darkened. "Your Majesty, what is the human doing here?" Kiwan demanded. "Observing," Doyon replied coldly, "and possibly helping. Our current strategies are failing, Admiral. We need new approaches." Taemin studied the holographic displays, watching how the Krauth ships moved. They flowed like water, perfectly coordinated, responding instantly to every Valtorian tactic. Traditional military strategy was useless against them, because they could predict and counter everything. "They are too coordinated," Taemin said quietly. "You need to confuse them. Make them uncertain." "How do you confuse a hive mind?" one of the commanders asked skeptically. "By being unpredictable, random, chaotic." Taemin pointed at the display. "Your ships fight in formations following established patterns. The Krauth can predict those patterns and counter them. But what if you didn't follow patterns? What if you used small independent strike teams that acted randomly?" Kiwan scoffed. "That is not how you fight a war. Organization and formation are the foundations of military strategy. Human military history is filled with examples of smaller, unpredictable forces defeating larger, more organized ones," Taemin argued. "Guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run tactics, fights and false retreats. The Krauth expect you to fight like Valtorians, so stop fighting like Valtorians. You want us to take military advice from a human engineer," Kiwan said mockingly. "This is absurd." Doyon raised his hand for silence. "Our current approach is failing. Taemin's ideas are unconventional, but that may be exactly what we need." He turned to Taemin. "Explain your strategy in detail." For the next hour, Taemin outlined his ideas. Break the fleet into smaller groups. Use unpredictable attack patterns. Create diversions and false targets. Make the Krauth waste resources responding to threats that weren't real. Hit them from unexpected angles, then retreat before they could respond effectively. The military commanders looked skeptical, but they were desperate. Ships and lives were being lost with every passing minute. "I will give you one chance," Doyon said finally. "Admiral Kiwan, you will implement Taemin's strategy in the Sector 7 battle group. If it fails, we return to conventional tactics." Kiwan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "As you command, Your Majesty." His eyes promised that if Taemin's plan failed, there would be consequences. The next 12 hours were the most stressful of Taemin's life. He watched the holographic displays as Valtorian ships began implementing his strategies. At first it seemed chaotic and disorganized. The Krauth pushed forward, sensing weakness. Then the trap started springing. Small groups of Valtorian ships would attack, then retreat, leading Krauth forces into ambushes. False signals made the enemy waste time and resources chasing ghosts. Unpredictable hit-and-run strikes began wearing down the hive mind's ability to respond effectively. Slowly, incredibly, the Krauth advance in Sector 7 began to stall. It's working, one of the commanders said in disbelief. Kiwan stared at the displays, his expression unreadable. Expand the strategy to all sectors, he said quietly. Implement the humans' tactics across the entire fleet. Over the following days, the tide of battle began to turn. The Krauth, used to fighting predictable opponents, struggled against the chaotic Valtorian tactics. They were still winning in some areas, but they had lost their overwhelming momentum. Taman barely slept during this time, constantly analyzing battle data and suggesting adjustments to the strategy. Yeri and Jiwoo stayed with him, bringing him food and forcing him to rest when he pushed himself too hard. It was during one of these exhausted moments that Yeri sat beside him and said quietly, "You are saving the Empire, Taman. You know that, don't you?" "I'm just suggesting ideas," he replied tiredly. "Your people are the ones fighting and dying. Ideas can be more powerful than weapons." She hesitated, then continued, "When this is over, I want to tell you something. Something I have been thinking about for a while. Tell me now. No, when the war is over. When we have won and you can hear it properly." She smiled softly. "It is important and I want you to remember it." Before Taman could press further, alarms blared again. New information appeared on the displays. Jiwoo was studying it and her face went pale. "The Krauth are pulling back from most fronts," she said. "But they are concentrating their entire fleet toward one target. They are going to make one massive push." "Where?" Doyen demanded. "Here they are coming for the homeworld." The command center erupted in urgent activity. Every available ship was recalled to defend the planet. Civilians were evacuated to underground bunkers. The orbital defenses were powered up to maximum. But Taman was studying something else. He had been analyzing Krauth communication patterns, trying to understand how their hive mind worked, and he had found something. "The command nexus," he said suddenly. "They have a central control point. One ship that coordinates everything." "We have theorized this for years," Scholar Hajun said, having joined them in the command center. "But we have never been able to identify which ship it is." "I can identify it," Taman said, pulling up his analysis. "By tracking communication patterns and response times. It's here." He pointed at one ship in the massive enemy fleet. "This one. It's not the largest or most powerful, but it's the brain. If we destroy that ship, what happens to the others?" Toyin asked. "I don't know," Taman admitted. "Maybe nothing. Maybe they keep fighting independently, or maybe they become confused and disorganized. But it's our best chance." Admiral Kaiwan stepped forward. "That ship is in the center of their fleet. Any strike force sent after it would be on a suicide mission. They would never make it back." "I will lead the mission," Yeri said immediately. "And I will go with her," Jiwoo added. "No," Taman said. "If you're going, I'm going too. I can identify the ship in real time and adjust the plan if needed." "Absolutely not," Yeri said firmly. "You are too valuable to risk." "So are you," Taman countered. "And I'm not letting you do this without me." Doyen looked at all three of them, then nodded slowly. "Then it is decided. You will take a strike team and destroy the command nexus. Admiral Kiwan, you will provide support and coordinate the extraction." Kiwan looked at Taman for a long moment. There was something in his eyes, a struggle between hatred and reluctant respect. "I will get you out," he said finally. "You have my word." 2 hours later, Taman found himself in battle armor sized for a human, sitting in a Valtorian strike ship beside Hyeri and Jiwoo. Around them were 10 of the Empire's best warriors, all volunteers for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. As they launched toward the enemy fleet, Hyeri turned to Taman. "If we die today, I want you to know something." "Tell me when we survive," Taman replied. "If we survive, I am going to tell you that I love you," Hyeri said quietly. "There, now you know. When this is over, I am going to say it properly without battle and death hanging over us. But I needed you to know just in case." Taman stared at her, shocked. The massive alien princess who could crush him with one hand had just told him she loved him. It should have been impossible. They were different species, different sizes, from different worlds, but somehow it felt right. "Then we definitely need to survive," Taman said, managing a smile. "Because I think I love you too." Jiwoo made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "You two are ridiculous. Can we please focus on not dying first?" The enemy fleet loomed ahead, thousands of Krauth ships like a swarm of deadly insects. Taman took a deep breath and activated his targeting systems. "Let's go save an empire." Taman woke up in a room filled with soft blue light. His throat hurt, his head was pounding, and every breath felt like work. Medical equipment surrounded his bed, all of it scaled down to human size. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to modify this room for him. "You are awake." He turned his head, wincing at the pain, and saw Emperor Doyen sitting in a chair beside his bed. Even sitting, the Emperor was imposing, but his expression was gentle. "How long?" Taman croaked. 3 days, Doyen replied. "You nearly died. If Hieri had found you even 10 minutes later, we would not be having this conversation." Memories came flooding back. The exhaustion after fixing the quantum core, returning to his quarters, then nothing. "Someone tried to kill me." "Yes," Doyen's voice was cold now. "Someone altered your atmospheric controls. It was made to look like a malfunction, but my security team confirmed it was deliberate. You were poisoned slowly while you slept. Who? That is what I intend to find out." Doyen leaned forward. "Taman, I brought you here because I believed you could help change the Empire for the better. But I underestimated how threatened the traditionalists would feel. You have enemies now, dangerous ones." The door opened and Hieri entered, followed by Jiwoo. Both sisters looked exhausted, with dark circles under their glowing eyes. Hieri's expression softened when she saw Taman awake, but there was also fury there, barely contained. "Brother, let me investigate," Hieri said. "I will find who did this." "Jiwoo is already investigating," Doyen replied. "You have a different responsibility now." He stood, his massive form seeming to fill the entire room. "Both of you owe Taman a life debt. I am making this official. From this moment forward, you are his personal guard. You will not leave his side until the people responsible are found and dealt with." Hieri bowed her head. "As you command." "Your Majesty," Taman said, struggling to sit up. "I don't need guards. Your sisters are imperial princesses. They shouldn't have to." "They owe you their lives," Doyen interrupted firmly. "In our culture, that debt must be repaid. This is how they will begin to repay it. Besides," his expression softened slightly, "I think they want to protect you." After the Emperor left, Hieri pulled a chair close to Taman's bed and sat down. Even sitting, her head was level with his. "I'm sorry this happened. I should have checked your quarters before you entered." "It's not your fault," Taman said. "It is my responsibility now. The debt I owe you is a sacred thing. I failed to keep you safe." She looked down at her hands. "For 2 days I thought you might die. I thought I might lose the chance to repay what I owe." Something in her voice made Taman look at her more carefully. There was more than duty in her eyes. There was genuine fear and concern. Jiwoo returned later that evening with information. She had been investigating secretly, talking to servants and guards who might have seen something. What she found was disturbing. "There is a faction," Jiwoo explained, pacing in the medical room like a caged animal, led by Admiral Kiwan and supported by Lady Murray. "They want to maintain Valtorian purity and keep other species at a distance. Your success with the quantum core made them look foolish. Your presence threatens everything they believe." "They tried to kill me because I fixed something?" Taman asked, incredulous. "They tried to kill you because you represent change," Hieri corrected. "Every day you succeed, you prove their beliefs wrong. To them, you are more dangerous than any weapon." Over the following days, Taman recovered under the watchful eyes of Hieri and Jiwoo. True to Doyen's word, the sisters never left his side. They took turns sleeping, always ensuring one of them was awake and alert. It was excessive, and it made Taman uncomfortable at first. But slowly he began to appreciate their presence. Hieri would sit with him during the long nights when pain kept him awake, telling him stories about Valtorian history and culture. Jiwoo brought him modified human food she had specially prepared, watching anxiously to make sure he ate enough. They became friends, something Taman had not expected. Despite their massive size and alien nature, they were just people. Hieri was thoughtful and serious, carrying the weight of being the eldest princess with quiet dignity. Jiwoo was more energetic and impulsive, quick to laugh but also quick to anger when someone threatened those she cared about. Scholar Hajun visited often too, bringing Taman books and technical manuals to study. The old Valtorian seemed genuinely interested in human perspectives on engineering and science. "You think differently than we do," Hajun said one afternoon, sitting cross-legged on the floor of the medical room. "Valtorians build for eternity. We create things meant to last 10,000 years. But humans build for function and adaptability. Both approaches have merit." "I'm just working with what I know," Taman replied. That is precisely why you are valuable. Hajun smiled. The Empire has spent so long perfecting what we know that we have forgotten how to learn new things. A week after the assassination attempt, Emperor Doyun summoned Taemin to a private meeting. Hyeri and Jiwoo accompanied him, of course, flanking him like bodyguards as they walked through the palace corridors. In the Emperor's private study, Doyun was examining holographic projections of ship designs. He gestured for Taemin to approach. "You are well enough to work again?" Doyun asked. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good. I have a project for you. I want you to design a new class of ship, something that combines Valtorian power and durability with human innovation and efficiency." He waved his hand and the holograms changed, showing various ship components. "Our current fleet is effective but outdated. We need something new." Taemin studied the projections, his mind already racing with possibilities. "This will take time. Months, maybe years. You will have whatever time and resources you need. This will be your flagship project, something to prove your value beyond any doubt." Doyun paused. "It will also make you even more of a target. Admiral Kiwon has been quiet since the attempt on your life, but I know he is planning something." "Let him plan," Jiwoo said fiercely. "We will be ready." That night, Taemin worked late in his new quarters, which had been moved to a more secure section of the palace. The rooms were smaller, more suited to his size, and the security systems had been upgraded considerably. Hyeri sat nearby, reading reports on her datapad while keeping watch. "Hyeri," Taemin said suddenly, "why did you really agree to be my guard? I know about the life debt, but you're an imperial princess. This must be humiliating for you." She looked up from her datapad, surprised by the question. "Humiliating? No, I volunteered before my brother even suggested it." "Why?" Hyeri was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "When you saved Jiwoo and me, you gave everything you had. Your money, your job, your safety. You did it without hesitation for two aliens you had never met. That kind of selflessness is rare, Taemin. Even among my own people. So it's just about repaying the debt?" "No." Hyeri set down her datapad and looked at him directly. "It started as debt, but it has become something else. In the days I spent helping you adjust to the ship, I saw how you think, how you solve problems, how you treat others with kindness even when you are struggling. And when I found you dying in your quarters, I realized something." "What?" "That I care about you. Not because of debt or duty, but because you are a good person, a person worth protecting." She smiled softly. "Also, Jiwoo would never forgive me if I let anything happen to you. She has grown quite fond of you." Taemin felt his face grow warm. "I'm fond of both of you too. I never expected to make friends here, but you've made this place feel less alien." "We are still very alien," Hyeri pointed out with amusement. "You know what I mean." A comfortable silence fell between them. Then alarms suddenly blared throughout the palace. Hyeri was on her feet instantly, her hand going to the weapon at her side. The door burst open and Jiwoo rushed in, her face grim. "There's been an explosion at the shipyard. The prototype you were working on has been destroyed. 3 engineers are dead." Taemin felt like he had been punched. No, we had safety protocols." "How did this happen?" "Sabotage," Jiwoo said. "Again. And this time they killed people to send their message." Hyeri's expression was deadly. "Kiwon, we cannot prove it yet," Jiwoo replied. "But yes, almost certainly." Taemin stood up, anger replacing shock. "They killed people because of me. Because they hate that I'm here. They killed people because they are afraid of change," Hyeri corrected. "This is not your fault, Taemin." But it felt like his fault. 3 Valtorians were dead because he had dared to accept the Emperor's offer. How many more would die before this was over? The question was answered sooner than he expected. That night, as he tried to work through the trauma of the shipyard explosion, another alarm sounded. This one was different, urgent, and terrifying. "What is that?" Taemin asked. Hyeri's face had gone pale. "That is the Imperial emergency alert. We are under attack." The Imperial ship was unlike anything Taemin had ever experienced. Everything was massive, built for beings twice his size. The ceiling was so high above his head that it felt like being inside a cathedral. The hallways were wide enough to drive a vehicle through. Even the furniture in his assigned quarters was enormous. Hyeri had stayed with him during the journey, helping him adjust. She showed him how to use the communication systems, how to request food from the automated kitchens, and how to navigate the ship's layout. Jiwoo visited often too, bringing him things she thought he might need, though most of them were completely wrong for a human. The blanket she brought could have covered a small house. How long until we reach your homeworld? Taemin asked as he tried to figure out how to sit on a chair designed for someone 3 times his size. 2 more days, Yeri replied. She was sitting on the floor to be closer to his eye level, something Taemin appreciated. I should warn you, Taemin. The capital will be overwhelming at first, and not everyone will be happy to see you. Your brother already warned me about that. Doyun is a good emperor, but he faces opposition from the traditionalists. They believe Valtorians should remain separate from other species. Your appointment as chief imperial engineer will anger them greatly. Taemin had been thinking about that. Why did he really choose me? There must be thousands of Valtorian engineers better qualified. Yeri was quiet for a moment. My brother believes the empire has become too rigid. We build things to last forever, but we have stopped innovating. When he heard how you solved our problem with simple tools and creative thinking, he saw an opportunity. You represent something different. I represent a target, Taemin said quietly. Yes, Yeri agreed, not trying to hide the truth. But Jiwoo and I will protect you. We owe you our lives. When they finally arrived at the Valtorian homeworld, Taemin pressed his face against the viewport and stared in awe. The planet was beautiful, covered in deep blue oceans and purple land masses. Cities glittered like jewels across the surface, connected by gleaming networks of transportation systems. But what really took his breath away was the size of everything. The buildings were enormous, some of them reaching high into the atmosphere. The Imperial Palace dominated the capital city, a structure so massive it looked like a mountain sculpted into architecture. The gravity hit him as soon as he stepped off the ship. Valtara's gravity was significantly stronger than Earth's or the station's artificial gravity. His first step nearly sent him to his knees, and only Yeri's quick reflexes kept him from falling. I am sorry, she said, steadying him with one hand. I forgot you would need time to adjust. For the first week, Taemin needed assistance just to walk. His muscles screamed in protest at every movement. Jiwoo had special weights made to help him build strength faster, though even the light ones felt incredibly heavy. The Imperial Palace was overwhelming. Corridors stretched for what seemed like miles. Rooms were the size of warehouses, and everywhere he went, Valtorians stopped and stared at him. Some looked curious, some looked amused, but many looked angry. Emperor Doyun had arranged for Taemin to meet the imperial court on his 3rd day at the palace. Taemin wore the formal clothes they had made for him, specially sized to fit his smaller frame. He felt ridiculous walking into the throne room with Yeri and Jiwoo flanking him like bodyguards. The throne room was filled with Valtorian nobles, all wearing elaborate armor and formal dress. They watched him enter with cold eyes, whispering to each other behind their hands. Doyun sat on his throne, looking every bit the emperor. Beside him stood an elderly Valtorian with kind eyes and simple robes. This was Hajun, the royal scholar, who Taemin had been told was one of the few people in the palace he could trust. Members of the court, Doyun said, his voice carrying across the massive room. I present Taemin of Earth, Chief Imperial Engineer. A tall Valtorian stepped forward from the crowd. He wore military armor marked with countless medals and honors. His face was hard and his eyes were hostile. Your Majesty, I must protest. Giving such an important position to a human is an insult to every Valtorian engineer who has served the Empire. Admiral Kiwan, Doyun replied calmly. Your protest is noted and dismissed. Taemin saved my sisters when no one else would. He has earned his position. He got lucky once, Kiwan said dismissively. That does not make him qualified to lead Imperial engineering projects. A woman in elegant robes spoke up next. Her voice was smooth but cold. I agree with Admiral Kiwan, Your Majesty. Lady Mirai speaking. While we appreciate what this human did for the princesses, his appointment sets a dangerous precedent. What message does it send when we elevate lesser species to positions of power? Taemin felt anger rising in his chest, but Yeri's hand on his shoulder kept him quiet. Doyun's expression hardened. Lesser species? Taemin accomplished what our engineers could not. He used creativity and innovation instead of brute force. These are qualities the Empire desperately needs. Then test him, Kiwan said with a cruel smile. Give him a real challenge. Let him prove he deserves the title you have given him. Doyun looked at Taemin. What say you? Will you accept a test? Taemin knew this was a trap, but he also knew he had no choice. Yes, Your Majesty. I will accept. Kiwan's smile grew wider. Excellent. The Imperial flagship's quantum core has been damaged for 3 months. Our best engineers have been unable to repair it. I give you 72 hours to fix it. If you succeed, I will support your appointment. If you fail, you return to Earth in disgrace. The court erupted in whispers. Taemin saw Jiwoo's hands clench into fists and Hyeri's expression became stormy. That is impossible, Hajun said quietly. 30 engineers have tried. The core is beyond repair. Then he should have no trouble fixing it, Kiwon said mockingly. Unless, of course, he is not as talented as His Majesty believes. Taemin stepped forward. His legs still ached from the gravity, and he was exhausted from days of adjustment, but he kept his voice steady. I accept the challenge, Admiral. Where is this quantum core? The engineering bay of the Imperial flagship was massive and filled with equipment Taemin barely recognized. The quantum core itself was a marvel of technology, a sphere of crystalline material suspended in an electromagnetic field. It should have been glowing with power, but instead it was dark and cracked. 30 Valtorian engineers stood around watching him with skeptical expressions. They had all tried and failed to fix the core. Now they wanted to watch the human fail too. Taemin ignored them and got to work. He spent the first 12 hours just studying the core, taking measurements, running diagnostics. The Valtorian engineers had tried to repair it by adding more power, more shielding, more complexity. They had made the problem worse. That's when Taemin understood. The problem wasn't that the core needed more. It needed less. He worked through the night, removing unnecessary components, simplifying systems, and redistributing energy flows. The Valtorian engineers watched in horror as he stripped away systems they considered essential. What are you doing? One of them demanded. You are destroying it. I'm fixing it, Taemin replied, not looking up from his work. Your problem is that you over-engineer everything. You build things to last forever, but sometimes simpler is better. 36 hours after he started, Taemin made the final connection and stepped back. The quantum core began to glow faintly at first, then brighter and brighter. Within minutes, it was running at full power. The engineering bay fell silent. 30 Valtorian engineers stared at the glowing core in disbelief. Taemin wiped his hands on his coveralls, exhausted but satisfied. It's fixed. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to sleep. He walked out of the engineering bay, leaving shocked engineers in his wake. He had done it in half the time Kiwon had given him. Now the Admiral would have to keep his promise, or would he? That night, Taemin returned to his quarters, too tired to even eat. He barely made it to his bed before collapsing. He was so exhausted he didn't notice the changes someone had made to his room's atmospheric controls. Hyeri found him 3 hours later, unconscious and barely breathing. Someone had altered the air mixture in his quarters, replacing oxygen with gases toxic to humans but harmless to Valtorians. It was subtle, designed to look like an accident. She carried his small body through the palace corridors, running faster than she had ever run before, shouting for medical assistance. Jiwoo met her halfway, having heard her sister's cries, and together they burst into the royal medical wing. As doctors worked to save Taemin's life, Hyeri stood outside the medical room with murder in her eyes. Someone had tried to kill him. Someone in the palace wanted him dead, and she was going to find out who. The holding cell was cold and uncomfortable, but Taemin barely noticed. He sat on the metal bench and stared at his hands, still covered in grease and burns from the repair work. His entire life savings was gone. His job was definitely over, and he would probably be banned from working on any orbital station in the sector. But somehow he didn't regret it. The station's alarm system suddenly blared with a priority alert. Taemin could hear people running in the corridors outside, voices raised in panic. Something was happening. A guard appeared at his cell door looking terrified. You come with me now. What's going on? Taemin asked as the guard roughly pulled him to his feet. The Valtorians want to see you. The station commander is losing his mind. They dragged Taemin through the corridors toward the main docking bay. Every person they passed stopped and stared at him with a mixture of fear and confusion. When they reached the bay, Taemin understood why. The docking bay had been completely transformed. Valtorian soldiers lined the walls, each one standing perfectly still in dark armor that seemed to drink in the light. They were all massive, towering over every human in the room. At the center of it all stood the station commander, a man who usually acted tough but now looked like he might faint at any moment. And in front of him stood 3 Valtorians, who made all the others look small by comparison. Taemin recognized Hyeri and Jiwoo immediately. They had changed out of their emergency suits and now wore elaborate armor that gleamed with precious metals. But it was the figure between them that made Taman's breath catch in his throat. He was enormous, easily 13 feet tall, with shoulders so broad he seemed to fill the entire space. His armor was different from the others, marked with symbols that practically screamed authority. His face was hard and sharp, with glowing eyes that seemed to see everything at once. This was someone used to being obeyed without question. The station commander was stammering something about proper procedures and diplomatic protocols when the massive Valtorian raised one hand. The commander immediately fell silent. "Bring the human forward," the Valtorian said. His voice was deep and resonant, carrying easily across the entire bay. The guards pushed Taman forward, and he stumbled slightly before catching himself. He looked up at the three Valtorians, feeling incredibly small. Yeri stepped forward. "Brother, this is Taman. He is the one who saved us, brother." Taman's mind raced. If Hyeri and Jiwoo were this giant's sisters, then that meant— "I am Doyun," the massive Valtorian said, his eyes fixed on Taman. "Emperor of the Valtorian Empire. My sisters tell me you risked everything to save their lives." Taman swallowed hard. He was standing in front of an actual emperor. "I just did what anyone should do. They needed help." Doyun studied him in silence for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, a small smile appeared on his face. "What anyone should do. Interesting. My sister's ship was sabotaged by political enemies who wanted them dead. Every station they passed refused to help them, citing costs and regulations. But you, a human with nothing, gave everything to save them." The station commander tried to speak up. "Your Majesty, this criminal stole station property and violated multiple—" Silence. Doyun didn't raise his voice, but the single word carried such weight that the commander immediately shut his mouth. "This human committed no crime. He saved members of the imperial family." Jiwoo moved to stand beside her brother. He spent his own money on the equipment. "The station did nothing. They were going to let us die." Taman saw the station commander's face go pale. Doyun turned back to Taman. "In Valtorian culture, a life debt is sacred. My sisters now owe you a debt that cannot be repaid with simple gratitude or money. According to our oldest laws, they must enter your service until the debt is satisfied." "What?" Taman and the station commander said at the same time. Hyeri nodded. "It is our law. We owe Taman our lives. We must serve him until he releases us from this obligation." "But I don't want," Taman started to say. "However," Doyun interrupted, "my sisters are not ordinary citizens. They are imperial princesses. Their service cannot be given lightly." He paused, and his eyes seemed to pierce right through Taman. "Therefore I make you this offer, Taman of Earth. Come to our homeworld. Accept the position of Chief Imperial Engineer. Work for the Empire, and through your service my sisters can repay their debt with honor." The entire bay fell silent. Taman felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "Chief Imperial Engineer? Of an entire empire, him?" "I don't understand," Taman said quietly. "I'm just a maintenance worker. I don't know anything about your technology." "My sisters watched you work," Doyun replied. "They said you accomplished in hours what our best engineers could not do in days. You used primitive tools and simple solutions to solve complex problems. That is exactly what the Empire needs." Hyeri stepped closer to Taman. Even with her towering over him, her expression was gentle. "You do not have to accept. But if you refuse, my sister and I will be bound by honor to follow you anyway. We cannot return home with this debt unpaid." Taman looked at the two sisters, then at the Emperor. He thought about his life on the station. The tiny quarters, the barely edible food, the loneliness. He had no family, no real friends. "Nothing waiting for him here if I accept," he said slowly. "What happens to me?" "You become part of the imperial household," Doyun said. "You will want for nothing. You will have resources beyond imagination, and you will help us build a better future for our people." He paused. "But you will also face challenges. Not everyone in my empire believes humans are worthy of respect. You will have enemies." "I already have enemies," Taman said, glancing at the station commander. "At least these new ones sound more interesting." Jiwoo laughed at that, a sound like rolling thunder. "I like him, brother." Taman took a deep breath. This was insane. Completely insane. But when would he ever get another chance like this? "I accept." Doyun nodded, looking pleased. "Then it is settled." He turned to the station commander, who had been standing frozen in fear. "Calculate whatever this human owes your station for the equipment he used. I will pay triple the amount." Yes, Your Majesty, the commander stammered, suddenly looking relieved. And then, Doyen continued, his voice going cold, I am placing this station on the Imperial Trade Restriction List. No Valtorian ship will stop here. No Valtorian will do business with you. You had the chance to help Imperial princesses, and you chose regulations over lives. Live with that choice. The commander's face went from relieved to horrified in an instant. Being cut off from Valtorian trade would destroy the station's economy. But there was nothing he could say, nothing he could do. Taman felt a hand on his shoulder and looked up to see Hieri smiling down at him. Welcome to your new life, Taman. I promise it will be interesting. As Valtorian soldiers escorted him toward their ships, Taman looked back one last time at the station that had been his home. He was leaving behind everything he knew, heading into a completely alien world with no idea what would happen next. But for the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt hope. Taman wiped the grease from his hands onto his already dirty coveralls and stared at the flickering screen in front of him. Another 12-hour shift was coming to an end at Orbital Station Nexus 7, and he was exhausted. The pay was terrible, the food was worse, and his tiny quarters barely had enough space for a bed. But it was work, and work meant survival. He grabbed his father's old toolkit, the only thing of value he owned, and started walking toward the exit of the maintenance bay. The station was one of the smallest outposts on the edge of human space, mostly used for refueling ships and minor repairs. Nothing exciting ever happened here, which suited most people just fine. That changed when the alarms started blaring. Taman rushed to the nearest monitor and saw what was causing the panic. 2 massive alien ships were drifting dangerously close to the station, their engines completely dead. They were huge, easily 3 times the size of any human vessel he had ever seen. The design was unfamiliar, all sharp angles and dark metal that seemed to absorb light. What's the situation? Taman asked one of the other technicians. Valtorian ships. Power failure. They're dying out there, the technician replied nervously. Commander already said we're not helping. Too expensive, and we don't want to get involved with them. Taman knew about the Valtorians. Everyone did. They were a warrior empire, powerful and dangerous. Their people were giants standing over 10 feet tall, and they didn't have much respect for humans. Most people avoided them whenever possible, but that didn't sit right with Taman. People were dying out there. He pulled up the sensor data on his personal tablet and studied the ships. Their life support was failing fast. Whoever was inside had maybe an hour, 2 at most. The power cores had gone completely cold, which meant they couldn't restart their systems even if they wanted to. Taman made a decision that would change his life forever. He grabbed his toolkit and headed for the maintenance pod bay. The security guard on duty was half asleep, barely looking up as Taman signed out a pod using a fake work order. His heart was pounding as he climbed inside and launched into space. The station's communication channel crackled to life. Taman, what are you doing? Get back here immediately. He switched off the radio. There was no time for arguments. As he approached the first Valtorian ship, he could see the damage more clearly. Something had hit their main power relay, frying the entire electrical system. It should have been impossible. These ships were built to withstand almost anything. This had to be sabotage. Taman maneuvered his tiny maintenance pod next to the ship's emergency airlock. He used his cutting torch to override the manual release, and the door hissed open. Inside, emergency lights were flickering and the temperature was dropping fast. He pulled himself through the corridors, following the signs toward the command deck. That's where survivors would be if there were any. The door to the command deck was sealed shut. Taman placed his hand against it and felt warmth on the other side. Someone was alive in there. He connected his toolkit to the door's manual override and started working on opening it. It took 20 minutes of careful work before the door finally opened. 2 figures sat in the darkness, both wearing emergency breathing masks. Even sitting down, they towered over Taman. They were Valtorians, and they were both female. Their skin was a pale blue color and their eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. One of them looked at him with surprise, then quickly tried to stand. Stay still, Taman said quickly, holding up his hands. I'm here to help. Your life support is failing. The taller of the 2 women studied him carefully. When she spoke, her voice was deep and commanding, even though she was clearly exhausted. You are human. Why would you risk yourself for us? Because you need help, Taman replied simply. He got to work immediately, plugging his diagnostic equipment into their ship's systems. I'm going to transfer emergency power from my pod. It won't be much, but it should give you enough to restart your backup systems. The shorter woman spoke up, her voice younger but just as strong. That will drain your pod completely. You won't have enough power to return. I'll figure something out, Taman said, not looking up from his work. His fingers flew across the controls, rerouting power systems and bypassing damaged circuits. This was what he was good at. This was what made sense. He worked for the next several hours, barely stopping to rest. The two Valtorian women watched him in silence, occasionally handing him tools when he pointed at them. They seemed amazed at how quickly he worked with such primitive equipment. Finally, after what felt like forever, the ship's emergency systems flickered back to life. Lights came on and Taman could hear the air circulation system starting up again. He had done it. Life support is stable, he said, exhausted. Your main power is still dead, but you can breathe now. You need to send out a distress signal. The taller woman stood up and Taman realized just how massive she really was. She had to be nearly 11 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a presence that filled the room. But her expression was gentle as she looked down at him. What is your name, human? She asked. Tamin. I am Hieri, she said, placing a hand over her heart in what seemed to be a formal gesture. This is my sister, Jiwoo. You have saved our lives, Taman. This debt will not be forgotten. Before Taman could respond, his radio crackled back to life. It was station security. Taman, you are under arrest for unauthorized use of station resources and theft of equipment. Return immediately. His heart sank. He had known there would be consequences, but hearing it made it real. He had spent what little money he had saved on the equipment he used. Now he would lose his job too. Jiwoo stepped forward, anger flashing in her glowing eyes. They dare to punish you for saving us. It's okay, Taman said quietly. I knew what I was doing. Hieri activated her ship's communication system and sent out an emergency beacon. Help is coming. My people will know what you have done for us. Taman nodded and headed back to his pod. As he climbed inside his nearly powerless vessel, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Dozens of massive ships were dropping out of hyperspace around the station. They were all Valtorian, and they were all converging on one point. The largest ship he had ever seen appeared at the center of the fleet, so massive it blocked out the stars behind it. This wasn't just a rescue party. This was an Imperial fleet. Station security grabbed Taman the moment his pod limped back into the bay. They put him in handcuffs and dragged him toward the holding cells. Through the windows, he could see the station commander running around in a panic, screaming orders at everyone. Something big was about to happen, and Taman was right in the middle of it.